let's take a look at the book of James. This is just going to give you an introduction to the book, some things you need to know when reading it, a little bit of a backstory. James is an incredible guy, some encouraging things about him. He's Jesus's half brother. That people don't really know that when they read this. This is not the James that is John's brother that you see as one of the disciples that walked with Jesus. Instead, this is Jesus's half brother. He goes on to pastor a church in Jerusalem. He actually takes over the church from the apostle Peter as Peter goes off to plant and do other works of the ministry, other churches. So James jumps in. James has a 20-year run as the pastor of this church. He goes through all different difficulties. He goes through all different struggles. He actually is martyred and murdered at the end of his tenure as the pastor of this church. That's why his book is so powerful. Not because he was murdered, but because he experiences so much. There's a famine in the land. He's got to tackle that, not to mention the cultural differences from being a very Jewish Jerusalem and Gentiles or non-Jews coming into the church, the way people are treated, judgmental mindsets, what it's like to deal with your own personal issues as a believer. So that's why James's letter is a little bit different, or James's book is a little bit different than some of the other books. It actually parallels another book in the Bible from the Old Testament, and that book is Proverbs. Because just as Solomon would write Proverbs, that it would go down to every person, it would be meant for every person that loves God, James writes his book in the same way. Now, if you're wondering, well, what's the difference? Why are the other books different than too? Well, because Paul would write some of those books to cities. So Corinthians was to the church in Corinth. Ephesians was to a church in Ephesus. Now, James is writing his book to every believer. And another great way why it parallels Proverbs is because James's heartbeat inside of his writing to you is that you get wisdom from his writing. He believes, as believers, wisdom is one of the most important things we can have. But James also is not tender on how he deals with things. Unlike the apostle, disciple John, who's very loving, James is very much right to the point. He gets right to the point. He says some things very matter of fact. It's a very hard-hitting book. He lays out a progression of sin. He lays out what sin will do in your life. He is very much a hammer and nails kind of writer. I love the book of James. It is so good. So we're going to jump into it. I want to encourage you, read the chapter and then come check out the video on it. Write out what God kind of said to you in your heart. Write out any questions that you have. If you have any questions right now, go ahead and drop them in the comments below about James or about the book in the Bible. James actually was, I believe I said it was a pastor for about 20 years of this church, and he did some incredible things.